So the objective of our time together is to understand the most important points in chapter 24 from your OER textbook titled Metabolism and Nutrition. So here's a nice animation for every cell to live. It's not isolated. It requires nutrients from the environment in order to survive. And that's what metabolism is. So we'll study all that in this class. So the main learning objectives is to understand what metabolism is and how it plays a defining role in homeostasis. See, without these two words, there's no life. We've seen since the beginning of ANP1, homeostasis is vital for survival of the cell and then the organism overall. We'll see how the universal energy molecule in our body called adenosine triphosphate, how is it made in our body? And so that it's a very complicated process called cellular respiration. So it has 3 steps. So we'll study the different steps in glycolysis, citric acid cycle, and electron transport chain. And we'll also briefly touch upon how they are metabolized in the body, the proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates. We'll talk about absorptive and post-absorptive states of metabolism. And then we'll briefly go over what a balanced diet means. What is nutrition? And there is a little activity that you can do by yourself where you can calculate your basic metabolic rate and your BMI index. So this poster hangs in the biochemistry lab, and it talks about all the chemical reactions that has been discovered so far. So it's been speculated that there's more than 1 million chemical reaction, millions and millions of chemical reactions that happen in every cell of your body, every microsecond. So these are the ones that have been discovered so far, and there's still so much more to discover. So a sum total of all the chemical reactions that happen in your body, in every cell of your body, is called metabolism. See, in everyday life, we would hear people say, oh, she has high metabolism. That's why she can eat whatever she pleases and still remain slim. So metabolism is talking about all the chemical reactions. All the chemical reactions that happen in one cell at a given time is called cellular metabolism. And in general, for most of these chemical reactions to happen, we need energy. So central to all the reactions, here, it's like a central highway, is the pathway that you are going to be studying today called cellular respiration. So the thing is, have you ever seen a clock, a manual clock that has been opened? It'll have all these wheels. One wheel will go one way and the other wheel will be powered by it and it will go the other way. It's kind of like that. If this central pathway is messed up, everything else in the cell will be stopped also. That is why our lecture today is so important. You really have to know what cellular metabolism is if we have to understand homeostasis. When you say metabolism, it involves 2 things. There are 2 types of chemical reactions that are included in metabolism. Catabolism refers to the breakdown of a large molecule into smaller molecules to give energy. So this is how ATP energy will be made. It's a catabolic pathway. Another bunch of reactions is called anabolism. So here our body can take monomers and small molecules and weave them together in the presence of energy, mainly in the form of ATP, to make the molecules that it requires for survival. So for example, think of a delicious plate of food. Okay, most people like steak. So when you eat steak, you know that proteins, steak is very high in proteins. Proteins in turn are made up of several polypeptides that are made of 20 different amino acids: arginine, serine, phenylalanine, and so forth. There's 20 different amino acids. So our body is going to break it down into the monomers, and then it will weave together the uh, the amino acids to make the proteins that it requires. For example, for muscle contraction, our body needs actin and myosin, right? So, as required, our body is going to make. So, these are the building blocks. Similar with carbohydrates, it's called polysaccharides. So, it's a long monomer of glucose. By enzymatic reactions, it's going to be broken down into monosaccharides, and that will be used for energy production in the animal. So without ATP, there is no life in a cell. Fat will be broken down to glycerol and fatty acids, and it is used for making all the membranes in our body and many other fat soluble substances. And also a high source of energy in our body. It can break down to smaller particles. It can enter the cellular respiration pathway to make ATP also. So carbs and fats are high in energy. These are energy giving molecules, and proteins are the building blocks for the structural elements in your body. For example, your hair, keratin is a protein, collagen, protein, your skin and nails and bones, your whole body is predominantly made of protein. That is why we require a lot of protein in our diet, and we need energy. So we need all of these macromolecules, but in the right proportion. So that's where we all go wrong. It's tempting to eat the whole bag of chips, and then that leads to eating disorders and obesity over the years. So, what is a nutrient pool? So, again, think about eating a hearty diet. You had a very healthy breakfast. So, what happens is, as soon as you imbibe food, the food is going to be broken down into its monomers, right? And then it enters the cytoplasm of the cell. And here, when it's hanging around, all the nutrients that came from your diet is called as the nutrient pool. Hopefully, it will have all the organic molecules that the cell requires for life. And then from the nutrient pool, it is either going to do a catabolic pathway. It might take a catabolic pathway to make ATP. So you already studied that the mitochondria is called as the powerhouse of the cell, where you break down the sugars to make a chemical energy called ATP, which is required for all the activities in the cell, like locomotion, contraction, and so forth. So 40% of the energy goes for making ATP, and 60% of the energy in the sugar molecule escapes as heat. So you see, now you can see there's a clue here. This is how your body temperature is maintained. See, that's why you feel so cold when you are on a starvation diet to lose weight for a wedding or whatever. And then when you don't eat, you feel very cold because the heat, thermoregulation, comes through the food that you eat. Anabolically, the nutrient pool can be used for making membranes, for recycling organelles, for making structural proteins. So for all the growth, maintenance, and repair of the cell, the nutrient pool will be used in anabolic pathways. So here is a cartoon of how all the nutrients will be absorbed in your digestive tract, and then it is distributed by the blood to every cell in our body, because every cell in our body requires ATP for survival. Most of the demanding cells would be your neurons. They require a lot of energy. So for thinking right now and for having a sharp thought process, you need energy in your body. And then the digestive tract is going to send the sugars to your liver. So after distribution, if there's any extra, it will store it in the liver. and then it's going to hang around in the blood and distribute the sugars and to every cell in our body. If there is excess, the sugars can be stored in muscle cells as glycogen, in liver cells, and it can also be stored. It is converted to fat and it is stored in adipocytes, which are the fat cells. So this is a review of what I just said. Anytime you eat a healthy diet, which is balanced in nutrients, the nutrients will enter the cell, and then it will see that these are the three nutrients. It's either going to be a carbohydrate, lipid, or a protein. It will break down into smaller constituents. The sugar is usually directed to make ATP energy. The fatty acids will become the triglycerides and cell membranes that the cell wants to make. Glucose mostly is stored for not, if it is stored, it is stored as glycogen in muscles and liver cells. And the amino acids will be woven together to make all the enzymes and the proteins that your body needs. So let's look at the most important thing in this lecture, the concept, which would be cellular respiration. We studied this in AP1 briefly. Cellular respiration is the most important process that's keeping you alive. So the two things that we do on every day would be glucose from your diet will combine with the oxygen that you breathe to give off carbon dioxide that you're exhaling and water you're getting rid of through peeing, and to make ATP energy. And one of the byproduct is heat. Kindly memorize this equation. It's very important. So the same thing in a chemical formula depiction, it was glucose, C6H12O6. So any food that you eat, carbohydrate, will be broken down to glucose. These are the monomers. So this is a redox reaction, oxidation reduction reaction. And then oxygen is very, very electronegative. It's always looking for electrons. So it's going to grab onto this hydrogen here. Boom, the hydrogen will jump here. That is why you left off with carbon dioxide as a waste product that you get rid of during breathing. And then water is a byproduct, but it makes about 38 ATP molecules. So this is a range. It can, depending on the efficiency of the system, it can be 34 to 38 molecules of ATP from one molecule of glucose. So in chemistry, you would have studied that there's a lot of energy between the carbon and hydrogen. Anytime you see C and H together, it means it's a high energy molecule. Because there's so much energy in the glucose molecule, we can't extract all the ATP at one go. If it all happens in one step, there'll be a mini explosion in every cell. So what our body has cleverly developed is that it will chip away the energy in the glucose molecule little by little. So the three steps that are involved is called glycolysis, citric acid cycle or Krebs cycle, and electron transport chain. There's a very nice video I want you all to watch about the process of cellular respiration. So kindly do it later. It's a 3 or 4 minute video. So the first step. So glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm. See, from the word, you can, extrapolate. Glyco is referring to glucose. Lysis means to break. So glucose will break into 3 carbon sugars called glyceraldehyde G3P. Sorry, I'm wrong. It's called pyruvate. A 6 carbon glucose will break down to 3 carbon compound called pyruvate. So this is happening in the cytoplasm. It is anaerobic. It can proceed even if in the absence of oxygen. So in the cytoplasm, when your body requires very quick ATP, let's say you are like doing a sprint, you're running so fast, There is not enough oxygen coming in because you are like flying so fast. So then your body will make quick ATP in glycolysis. So the first thing to do is glucose, which is a 6-carbon sugar, will be broken down into 3-carbon sugars through a series of steps. So the first 2 steps, you can see ATP has to be invested. Glucose will become glucose 6-phosphate that will be converted to fructose 1,6-bisphosphate, all using ATP. Then it breaks down into 3-carbon sugars. So even though this process of 8 to 10 steps happens, making only 2 ATPs, it makes electron carriers. NAD is an electron carrier. So what happens is NAD will grab onto one proton and becomes NADH. So there is a net gain of only 2 ATPs, but NADH is made here. And again, the series of steps continues. So from glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, it becomes a phosphoglycerate, and then that's phosphoenol pyruvate. So here one ATP is given off here, ATP is given off here, but it ends with making pyruvate. This is the most important step. So we have made 2 molecules of pyruvate, and we have made only 2 ATPs, but we have made an electron carrier called NADH. You're going to see why this is important. So we have a chemical that is carrying a electron, a hydrogen molecule. So anytime I say hydrogen, it has 1 proton and 1 electron. So the steps are clearly explained in this video here. There's an animation there for you. So this is happening anaerobically in the cytoplasm. So this can proceed even in the absence of oxygen. The second step, there is a transition step where the pyruvate is converted to acetyl-CoA, which is a 2-carbon sugar. So 2-carbon chemical, can't call it sugar. So here, carbon dioxide is released. So a third of the carbon dioxide that you're exhaling right now is coming from this step, the transition step. Acetyl-CoA then combines with a cycle that is happening in the mitochondrial matrix. It is called citric acid cycle, also called Krebs cycle, named after Hans Krebs, who discovered the cycle. He got a Nobel Prize for this. So this process can happen only in the presence of oxygen. So it is aerobic. So as the molecules are converted to different chemicals in a series of reactions that goes round and round, it will only make 2 ATP. Again, it's not going to make too much ATP. It's going to make only 2 molecules of ATP, but it will make electron carriers called NADH, and FADH2. So the hydrogen is going to be grabbed, which will go to the mitochondria where most of the ATP will be made. This is mitochondrial matrix. It will go to the mitochondrial membrane where most of the ATP is made. So here a byproduct is ATP, NADH, FADH2, and carbon dioxide. 2/3 of the carbon dioxide that you're exhaling right now is coming from the citric acid cycle. So now the next step, it will enter the electron transport chain that is found in the inner mitochondrial membrane. So mitochondria has an outer membrane and an inner membrane that is thrown into folds called cristae. So this reaction with a series of electron transfers is happening in the inner mitochondrial membrane. So what NAD so because the electrons are shuttled from protein to protein in this membrane, it is called electron transport chain. So in the inner mitochondrial membrane, there's all these protein complexes. It is called protein complex 1, 2, 3, and so forth. So NAD is going to come and drop off the proton in protein complex 1, FAD in protein complex 2. So when they drop off their hydrogen atoms here, the electrons will be shuttled protein to protein. And this will create a hydrogen ion gradient in the inner mitochondrial space, the space here. So in the mitochondria, we have the outer membrane, inner membrane space, and this is the matrix. It was in the matrix that the citric acid cycle happened. So NAD is coming and dropping off the proton in the protein complex 1. FAD is dropping off the proton in complex 2. So in the hydrogen, the electrons are shuttled protein to protein, and when this shuttling happens, it will pump protons. The protons will pumped in the inner mitochondrial space, the space here. So the concentration of hydrogen is high here and it is low here. So because of concentration gradient, it's going to fall down the concentration gradient through a hydrogen channel protein. It's also called ATP synthase. So when the hydrogen drops from high concentration to low concentration, it's like a molecular motor that converts ADP to ATP. So most of the energy is made here by ATP synthase. And the electrons that are shuttled will combine with oxygen and hydrogen to form water. So the oxygen that you're inhaling right now, the highly electronegative oxygen is waiting here. It is going to grab on to the electron. So the oxygen will grab onto the electron, combine with the proton and become water. So, it is complicated, but it is so fascinating. Most of the people who discovered the different steps in everything I've been talking about, they all got a Nobel Prize. So here's a nice animation of how the electron transport happens. The electron transport is increasing the hydrogen ion concentration here because they are pumping the hydrogen here. And when the hydrogen flows back through ATP synthase, ADP is converted to ATP. And the electrons will be grabbed on by the oxygen and it will combine with the protons to form water. It's like osmosis, right? You've studied osmosis, is the flow of water from high concentration to low concentration. And here it's similar to that, right? So that's why it's called chemical osmosis or chemiosmosis. So this is a summary slide that is talking about where the ATP is coming from. So during glycolysis, we make only 2 ATPs, net gain of only 2 ATPs, but we have made the electron carrier called NADH. In a citric acid cycle also, very little ATP, but we are making NAD and FAD, which will enter the electron transport chain where most of the ATP will be made. A lot of ATP is made in the electron transport chain. All right, now we are going on into nutrition. So that is the fate of what happens when you eat carbohydrates. So here's some terminology you'll have to remember. Gluconeogenesis. See, anytime you see Genesis, Genesis means the beginning. The first chapter in the Bible is Genesis, the beginning. So gluconeogenesis is the synthesis of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources like lactic acid or glycerol. Glycogenesis is the formation of glycogen. See, glycogen is there in the word, glycogenesis. Glycogenolysis is the breakdown of glycogen. Anytime you see lysis, it means something is breaking. Lipolysis refers to the breakdown of lipids. Lipogenesis, it will be the building up of the lipids that's required for the body. Usually it begins with acetyl-CoA that you saw in the transition step. So see, in your diet is not just carbohydrates, right? Like when you eat a plate of food, it is full, it has proteins and lipids. So both lipids and proteins will also join the same cellular respiration pathway, glycolysis, citric acid cycle, and electron transport chain, but the point of entry is different. For example, lipids is made up of triglycerides, right? It will break down to glycerol and fatty acids. The glycerol is going to enter during glycolysis, and the fatty acids are going to be broken down to acetyl-CoA, and it'll enter the cycle at this point of entry. Proteins are going to be broken down to amino acids, and they also can enter the same pathway in different sites, the pyruvate site or the acetyl-CoA site. What is absorptive state of metabolism? What is post-absorptive state of metabolism? So anytime you ingest a plate of food, there's a lot of nutrients in your GI tract. So we studied the digestive system, like how carbohydrate digestion starts in your saliva, in your mouth. A little bit of lipid digestion also starts there. And then as it progresses through the GI tract, it's completely broken down into these monomers. So your GI tract after a meal is full of nutrients. So when this chemical signal is picked up, the pancreas is going to make, apart from a lot of digestive enzyme, is going to make insulin. And it's insulin that will open the gates or the receptors that will take in the sugars inside the cell. So what happens is when there's a lot of, when the nutrient pool is rich after a meal, so the nutrients from the cells will enter the blood supply. And the blood supply is going to take all the nutrients to every cell in our body. So you can see how the insulin is stimulating the uptake of glucose and protein uptake into the cell. When it goes to the liver, if there is any excess glucose, it will store it as glycogen. If there's too much sugar, you ate the whole cheesecake, there's too much sugar and fat. So your body doesn't require so much sugar. So what happens is it will enter the adipocytes, and then the lipids are stored in the adipocytes. So this is the absorptive state. This is the time following a meal when nutrition absorption is the maximum, and then it can last for 3 to 4 hours, absorptive state. So post-absorptive state, you've been so busy, there's no time for lunch now. So the nutrient pool has dropped. So now it's all about homeostasis, right? Our body is trying to maintain the blood sugar levels. So now the pancreas will pick up that message, and then it will secrete glucagon. So glucagon will work on the liver cells to break down the glycogen reserve and increase the blood glucose concentration. Same in your muscle tissue also. In the adipocytes, glucagon will stimulate adipocytes to break down the lipids to make energy. So this is the homeostasis as to how our body is behaving when you are well fed or when you are in a starvation mode. All about maintaining the sugar supply in your blood. So this picture here is showing all the nutrients that you require for survival. So the only way the nutrients can enter your body is through your diet. So we need a lot of proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids. So they are called macronutrients. You want them in large quantities. Water also. That's why water is also a macronutrient. The act of absorption of nutrients from your diet is called nutrition. A balanced diet will have all the elements that your body requires for survival. Then it's called as a balanced diet. When there is not enough nutrients, it's called malnutrition. Homeostasis can be maintained only if you have a balanced diet. So homeostasis is maintained only if the digestive tract can absorb enough nutrients it requires. So we have macronutrients required in large quantities, and we also need micronutrients like vitamins, minerals, and fiber are required in small quantities. So like most of the things you might be able to recognize. So we need calcium for action potentials, for muscle contraction, for bones. So we'll see a little bit more about what our body requires. Why do we need vitamins? They, like plants, fruits and vegetables especially, are very high in vitamins. And also whole grain food are very high in vitamins. If it can dissolve in water, they'll call it water soluble vitamins. Some vitamins are fat soluble. Why do you require vitamins in our diet? Because they are cofactors to many of the enzymes. If you want your enzyme to work, you need vitamins. They are organic compounds. They are required in very small quantities. Most of them are coenzymes. That's the key word here. Just a few examples of fat soluble vitamins: A, D3, E, and K. Water soluble vitamins are B and C. Vitamin D can be produced by the skin when we are exposed to sunlight, and vitamin K it's produced in the body by by bacteria that live in your intestines. Very interesting. So minerals also we require in small quantities, and then you already know, like if there's an iodine deficiency, that can lead to goiter and other problems, endocrine problems. So this is a picture of my plate. That is the suggested eating plan shown by United States Department of Agriculture. They update it every 5 years. And their suggestion is that our diet has half the plate is filled with different varieties of fruits and vegetables, so that you get all the vitamins and minerals and micronutrients that you require. And the grains, it is suggested that it is mostly whole grains, that is full of fiber. We need fiber for a healthy digestion, right? Because fiber in the diet stimulates mucus production in your intestines. And because of that, the food will slide down the GI tract and you are not constipated. So, for a good bowel movement, you need fiber. So, it is suggested that you eat whole grains because it's full of fiber and also B vitamins. The the husk of the grains are rich in B vitamins. And then, of course, a, a, more than a fourth of your plate should be proteins, high quality proteins, low in saturated fat. A glass of milk is also suggested, but this all goes with a very active lifestyle. Like exercising for at least going for a walk for at least 30 minutes every day. So that depends on your body type and your body needs. uh, there is a series of tables that's talking about the different nutrients and the effect on the body. So let me just go over one or two of the main nutrients. uh, Anytime you eat a whole grain bread or vegetables or fruits, they are all high in carbohydrates. And we saw that carbohydrates play a huge role in providing ATP for your energy. And there is a daily recommended amount for each of these by the Dietary Association. Protein. We require protein for building up all the structural elements of your body and for the enzymes of your body. Sodium required for, remember all the sodium pumps and potassium pumps. So the electrolyte balance is very important in our body. They all will play a role in action potentials in our body and membrane function. Calcium for neuron function, for your bone structure. Phosphorus, DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, ribonucleic acid. If you remember the DNA structure, it has a phosphate group in it. So phosphates are found in ATP. So we need phosphorus to make the high energy compounds and for nucleic acids. Magnesium is the cofactor for many enzymes. Iron, hemoglobin in blood, the central molecule is iron. So it's a component of hemoglobin. Zinc is a cofactor for many immune enzymes, and so forth. You need all these for optimal health. Vitamin A is a precursor for rhodopsin, the visual pigments for sight. D3 is required for calcium absorption and for bone formation. And vitamin K, the clotting factor, and so forth. So that is why, in order to get the 26 most essential nutrients, you must have a salad every day and a fruit. More diverse, the better. So, what if you are a vegetarian? You can still. So, if a food group is going to give all the amino acids in a protein, it is called a complete protein. But in nature, most of the food supply can be incomplete protein. So, here, these are sources of complete protein: milk, eggs, beef, cheese, chicken, fish. So, these have all the amino acids in them when you consume it. So, for vegetarians who are eating fruits and rice and grains and pasta, they have to combine food sources and uh, the traditional way of cooking, right? If you are in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, Brazil, it's all rice and beans. So, rice and beans, so if you take rice and beans, rice is low in amino acid lysine and high in valine. And it is the opposite for all the legumes. So together it becomes a complete food. So even if you are a vegetarian, you can eat a optimal diet. And here is one of my favorites. It's hummus and pita bread. It's an explosive combination. Even pizza, cheese pizza, it's a combination of, it makes it a complete food. All right, the main problem now is how much food that do we need? We have to eat healthy, most of us know it, but like eating is also overlaps with the psychology of the person. That's why they call it stress eating. You eat when you're sad, or like on the other hand, like we also eat when we celebrate something. It brings people together. It is a good thing. But the thing is, all of us have fallen short and misused food. So food has calorie value. For example, carbohydrate offers 4 calories per gram. Proteins also 4 calories, whereas lipids is giving you 9 calories per gram. And depending on your height and sex, you're going to require different amount of calories. In general, I've heard a normal built woman would need only 1600 calories to maintain, whereas men, because they are big built, they need more calories. So we need these calories to maintain the basic metabolic rate. So this is the energy use. So even if you're sleeping, your body requires energy. We require about 17 calories an hour. BMI refers to the body mass index. So this is measured with your height and weight. And they'll say a body mass index of maybe 25 is ideal, but this does not take into account the muscle mass. And metabolism of every individual is different. See, the way you digest and absorb nutrient is very unique to you. Genetics play a role, your lifestyle play a role. Some of the eating disorders you would have heard of is anorexia nervosa. This is like a psychological disorder. So the people think they think they are too big and they starve themselves, which is bad. Bulimia. This is self-induced vomiting. They also like diuretics and so forth. Both of them have a psychological basis to it. And obesity, which is the most common epidemic the world over. Like in USA, 40% of the adult population is overweight. And here's a picture of the big losers. So the problem with obesity is when you eat more than what you are burning, right? Calories in a day should be equal to calories out in a day. So when this balance is upset, when you're eating more than you're burning, is when you're going to put on weight. And then it happens over a period of time, it creeps up. So many people, like, every other ad in the TV is about losing weight. There's actually no miracle weight loss. It took you years to put on the weight. So if you're going to remove the weight in an ideal way, it should be done in a slow way also. Like you should like drop 1 or 2 pounds a week. And here's the how much calories you burn. So from this table, you can see that, jogging, running, swimming, any kind of sports is very good for burning calories. So the problem with obesity is it is connected with cardiovascular disease, diabetes, high cholesterol, and early death. So more recent. So if you are in your ideal weight, you are more healthy. So what have we learned? We learned metabolism. We learned how metabolism is important for homeostasis. We study the anabolic pathways where we are making materials we need, and catabolic pathway where we are breaking the food that we ate to make ATP. And we saw the different steps that run cellular respiration. We studied the basics of micronutrients, uh, vitamins, and minerals. And I hope that helped.